think we're good to go. Right, hello everybody, and this is Lana Hempsel from the Norwich Guide Dog Forum. Scott, could you mute yourself, please? Let me mute you. This is Lana Hempsel from the Norwich Guide Dog Forum, and this is our virtual Guide Dog Forum that we are running every third Thursday of the month, and today we have the absolutely huge privilege of being visited by our constituency MP, the constituency MP for Norwich North, and that's Chloe Smith. So without further ado, Chloe, you've been an MP for a very long time. Honestly, I can't remember how long. You got elected on a by-election, and we're just really fortunate that you've agreed to join us today, which is so lovely. If you want to say a couple of bits about yourself, and then we'll do the same, and we can talk about issues that visually impaired people are sort of facing in and around Norwich, and what it's like coming out of lockdown, etc., and see where we go from there. Is that okay? Thanks, Chloe.
Well, Lana, thank you very much. It's really good of you to invite me to come to speak to your forum, and thank you for that really kind introduction. A big hello to everyone who's following this either on the stream or another way. It's really great to be able to hear from you, and I must say that for a constituency MP, there's absolutely no substitute to doing it like this, and trying to hear from those people who might be particularly affected by certain issues, how that needs to be done, because with the best will in the world, people who are responsible for making policy or law or great big whizzy ideas are always liable to get it wrong unless they hear from people who are really going to be affected by those. So I really welcome that chance to come and chat to you today, and I'm really grateful that you asked me to do that. So as you mentioned, Lana, I've been the MP for Norwich North since 2009, so for 11 years. And in that time, I've done various kinds of constituency work with constituents who have visual impairments of various kinds. Some have been hugely enthusiastic campaigners. For example, I'm sure some of you already might know Bernie Reddington, just as one example. And people like Bernie, do a magnificent job actually in again, as I say, helping me to understand some of the issues as they are lived, and also making sure that wider awareness goes beyond just the community of those who might have a visual impairment, but into the wider public, and that's as it should be, because there ought to be that broader and universal understanding. And then what I always try to do in my constituency work for any constituent is to take those issues where they need to be solved. So in some cases that might be very local. So for example, the city council or county council about pavements issues or highways issues, things like that. Or it might well be to ministers or other bodies in Westminster. And to give an example from a related field, I've been helping a couple of constituents over time with things like access to work and the issues that come from that in the DWP. And of course, that's not even to get started on the very, very much wider issues of the benefit system more generally, or the health service, or other things that might well be really impactful on people listening to today's session. So, Lana, you've asked me particularly to start looking at a couple of questions that I know have been raised by the forum, and I'd be really keen to get into two of those. I know that for two of the others, you do also have a speaker coming on shortly from the local transport authority, who'll be able to really go into detail actually on e-scooters, and also on perhaps on the development of the city centre in Norwich and the specifics of certain streets and pavements. But two that I know you've put my way are include first of all how it can be that even since the Disability Discrimination Act, there can still be communication from public bodies, and I would also suggest from plenty of private organisations as well, that just isn't accessible. Still leaves people struggling. The other question that I know you've put my way is around some temporary measures to do with coronavirus. So, for example, street barriers. Now, most obviously these are in Norwich city centre, but obviously they'll be elsewhere in Norfolk as well. And I mean, I know those can be a real, perhaps a little bit like perennial issues, such as A boards and paper and advertising and things like that, which can be really difficult to navigate around if you're, if you're visually impaired or going with the aid of a dog or other things like that. So very happy to start on a few words on those topics, but also really keen to hear from people on the group, and perhaps you might be able to, some of you introduce yourselves with a little bit of context about, your experiences and the things that have really affected you over time. What would you like me to do first, Lana? Shall I go into the two issues, or should we hear?
I think shall we do the rounds first, and just, if everybody wants to say a couple of words about themselves, because that's kind of a bit more personal anyway. So obviously, I'll kick off. I'm Lana Hempsel. I do not live in your constituency, Chloe, but I do avail it myself of it area occasionally, especially the Thorpes and Tandra bit of it. But I sort of took over and joined the coordinator group for the Norwich Guide Dog Forum, just because it's kind of naturally where I gravitate to. And I suppose the issues that I've had recently, which is why it's lovely to have you on as the Member of Parliament, is actually there's an awful lot of legislation which is necessarily being pushed through at pace, to try and keep up with the infection rate, to make sure that social distancing is right, to make sure that we stay safe and healthy in some shape or form. But a lot of it is just a bit rubbish when it comes to bringing us all on board, and I'm sort of worried that a lot of the legislation that's been brought forward, that's kind of been aimed at narrowing the gap between able-bodied and disabled people, is actually widening, not through malice or forethought, but literally because everybody's chasing their tail. Nobody does the EQA at Westminster anyway. Equalities impact assessment, nobody does them anymore. It's kind of left to local councils, and it's almost just like trying to get us to a place where these things don't get forgotten, where we don't end up back at square one when it comes to simple access issues. So I think a lot of people will agree with me that we went into lockdown, people stayed at home. A lot of people who shielded after lockdown was finished just went, what's changed? Really, what's changed? There's no vaccine really, so what's changed for us? A lot of disabled people simply don't go out because public transport's become more difficult. There's a lot less of it, and it's a lot more restricted. So I think it's kind of a plea to you and other members of Parliament: don't leave us behind, because it does feel like we are being left behind in a really big way. So it seems like it's necessary to make the emergency legislation, but just kind of don't forget us 5 months down the line. That's all really. So that's from me. Does anybody want to go next? Annette, do you want to introduce yourself? Annette is actually a constituent of yours, so Annette, do you want to go next?
Yes, I'll go next.
Brilliant.
I'm Annette, and I'm the media volunteer for Norwich Guide Dog Forum. So you obviously see my posts regularly on the Facebook page. So we try to raise awareness of any issues to help anyone living with sight loss, not just a guide dog owner, a cane user, a carer, any format of person living with sight loss. We're there to help. And obviously I'm a Helsdon resident, so I'm a Broadland constituent. And I've been living with sight loss, and I do agree with the first question that was put forward to you about the accessible format. I have received the letters, one recently, and I'm thinking, oh, yeah, RNIB, guide dogs, different trusts have informed you that, we can't read these letters, and a month ago you're still sending them out. We've working with RNIB, because I'm also a volunteer there. We've done the COVID testing, which wasn't accessible to us either. So as much as I had one in the post, all sorts of things there. Just the Equality Act in 2010 really hasn't any regard for us in this pandemic at the moment. So that, you know, obviously there's quite a few issues that myself and a lot of people have been thinking that we've been disregarded in this pandemic, and think that you need to think a bit further about the issues that we're facing as well.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to address now, Chloe, in relation to that, or?
Lots of things. This is throwing up all sorts of really important things. And where to start? Well, just to pick one thing that you just spoke about there, if I may, Annette. So the COVID tests. Is that a home test kit you're referring to there? And is it that, you know, it comes with packaging and so on that is too difficult to access?
Yeah. Yes, it came along with packaging. It was like a little cardboard donation box that you had to put together with all the tabs and flabs. Luckily, I'm a fundraiser, so I know how to put a donation box together. But I think a lot of people had severe issues with that. You then have to put get the swab out the container. You can't see into mirror to see where your mouth is, so you've literally got to stab at this thing, do the nose thing as well, and put it back into a test tube, which is very small. So being a female, I should think maybe a mascara issue is quite relevant to doing that. But it's, and then package it all back up, put it in the post. If you had to put it in the post boxes were always the busiest ones on main roads. And before you could actually do this, there was a barcode that you had to put the number in when you rung up for collection, if you were doing that, or find the relevant thing. We can't read those things; they're too small. But luckily, we have had the RNRB work with us campaigning, and they've put all these things into practice, and we're looking for things changing. So, thumbs up to the RNRB for taking that campaign on, and other people that are working alongside them too.
Yes, absolutely. As it happens, I've been to a testing centre myself and used that, but I haven't used the home test kit, so I actually hadn't seen it with my own eyes, as it were. So thank you for running through those issues. And also, the other examples that you both gave about things that just weren't things that just aren't services where people just aren't thinking about everyone who needs to access them, and it seems to me that it's just not tenable for you to have to go each time to the RNIB or to the NNAB or to anybody else, where even a friend or a carer, you can't always be going to those organisations and saying can you ensure all of this works. There has to be a much greater push, and I would certainly expect this from public services, to make that possible on a more independent basis. So that's always what I'd be pushing for. But I suppose no. Sorry, please go ahead.
You do have a register of all the people that are severely sighted and partially sighted as well. So I think it's Norfolk County Council that has one, and I think every council does. So, and I think Vision Norfolk did have a huge influence in trying to help, sort out, communications at a latter date. But the fact that you helped them register, and that you didn't think to use that information to contact people in another format.
That's what I was going to ask. Yes. So I mean, is it your experience with the community that actually that register is effective at catching everybody, and therefore it is practical for organisations to use that register?
Well, when you're registered with a sight impairment, you're registered with your county council.
Yes.
So that's the first step. So they hold the information to start with.
Yes. Okay. So it is. So that is the right way to do it in your view. Yeah. Okay.
And before you go there, I do live in Helsden, and I have done a bit of fundraising recently to name a puppy. But the residents might be a bit out if I don't mention our pavement needs addressing. So there might be a letter coming in the post to you.
Well, as ever, so let's get that going to the right place. We'll have to make sure that your local councillors are in on that, because it's them who do those.
Yes, we can't do we can't do a blindfold walk at the moment, but I would get the person round here, because my husband just mentioned this morning when we walked back, he says, I hope you're going to mention the pavements. So Helsden, I've mentioned the pavements.
Certainly have, and it's noted. And I tell you what, I will help you if you need to get a properly accessible letter to the right councillor to really make the point.
Thank you very much.
Oh dear. Right. Okay. Thanks for that, Annette.
Moving on.
Moving on. Well, no, because I know the Helsden councillors, so yeah. So I'm just hiding. Scott, do you want to ask a question, buddy?
Yeah. Good afternoon, Chloe.
Afternoon, Scott.
Yeah. Just a bit around about myself, really, as you asked. It's not really a question, but I'm the founder of the Guide Dog Forum at Norwich, and so this was over 5 years ago, and there's 5 currently running in the east, and that's Ipswich, Kings Lynn, Cambridge, Peterborough, and ourselves. So
Yes.
we meet up prior to COVID. We meet up as coordinators to discuss different aspects and goings on from each different groups, because each coordinator runs their own forum in their own personal way.
Yes.
As I said, Norwich was pioneered really due to an interview I did on Radio Norfolk with our engagement officer. And after that, we sat outside the forum and had a coffee. And she worked so hard covering such a big, vast space. I said, is there nothing that as owners we could do to help you get together? And when we sat and discussed it, and I said, look, I'm prepared to run this thing in Norwich. And it was just a light bulb moment about, oh, we'll call it the Norwich Guide Dog Forum. Suffolk followed very quickly, then Kings Lynn, Cambridge, Peterborough. There's been 7 altogether, but sadly we've lost 2 recently, but hopefully we'll get them back in Cromer and Great Yarmouth. But it's a huge achievement to carry on running this with a team of people that are all purely voluntary. None of us get paid. So the forum is just one thing I do. I'm a fundraiser for Guide Dogs. I'm an accredited speaker for the charity. I also am a Connect leader for RNIB in North Norfolk. Prior to COVID, I run 2 lunch clubs, one in North Walsham, one in Norwich, in adjacent with Blind Veterans UK, a coffee social. I set up blind football for children at Norwich City Football Club with the disability officer, Darren Hunter. So I am fairly active when it comes living. I live in North Walsham. I'm 50 plus. I have a very proud owner of a very handsome German Shepherd guide dog called Benji. He's 8.5. He's my first ever guide dog, and I'm very privileged to have him as my sight guide. He's an absolute wonderful animal that those that know him. Just to touch on COVID, I'm a single person living in North Walsham. I have a PA that was helping me with everything, living alone. Shopping went out the window because she felt that she was already in the care sector and didn't have the time to carry on shopping. So I quickly got onto the Good Neighbourhood scheme in North Walsham, who have been an absolute godsend. They've done my shopping. They allow a volunteer to come out to the park with me and free run my dog once a week, because of obviously safety for me and the dog. These people at a safe distance keep an eye on Benji and me, and the dog loves it every week, so he gets his stimulant from exercise and get away from working for a while in harness. So because I give so much to people in Norfolk or Norwich and North Walsham, I've decided, because they've been there for me from March, but they've been helping people in North Walsham for years, that I now have become one of their volunteers to either do phone calling and check on people that they're absolutely safe and well, and those vulnerable people that live alone that just want to chat for half an hour once a week. So I'm very privileged and honoured to be involved with Guide Dogs. They're a great team, Annette and Lana and Angie. They do all the admin work. I do the face-to-face meetings when we meet at the Annesley, and I just can't wait to get back to seeing all my colleagues and friends. It's been quite a disaster for a lot of people, but I have a good support from my family, my network of friends, and just being focused, and even taking a dog out in the middle of the night because he doesn't settle, because he's out of routine. It gives me that walk. I'm in perfect safety. There's no cars, and just to get out of the house for an hour in the middle of the night, it seems stupid. But to me, I know the dog's getting the exercise, even through COVID and the lockdown. Some of us weren't prepared to stay in all the time. for my own safety and really my own personal issues with mental illness and staying out. I just needed to get in for my own stability, and I just very fortunate that everybody is supporting people in the area, and I just look forward to moving on as and when we're allowed to. And I do appreciate your time, Chloe, for being here today, and thanks for listening to me.
Well, Scott, thank you very much for sharing all of that with me. I can only begin to imagine some of what you've going through recently, and I know that this has been a real thing, obviously not only locally but also nationwide. Just before joining you, I was taking a look at the RNIB website actually, and looking at five ways they can be of help during COVID, and there will be thousands of people across the country who maybe some of you are in touch with through the forum network. I don't know, but who I know will particularly struggle with these issues over lockdown. So I really thank you for sharing those with me. And I guess my focus today then would be on what remains to be solved. So for example, whether it's the test kits or whether there's anything else that we know now but we didn't know 4 months ago that we could focus on getting right in the months ahead, conscious that unfortunately we probably do still have some months of restrictions still to go rather than being fully out of the woods. That's perhaps what I'd like to try and take away from today's meeting.
Yeah, I guess lots of people that are on their own, and I've spoke to my clients because I know they're on their own, they've got no family, and although we are RNIB and guide dogs and everybody are no longer face-to-face for the foreseeable future, I just still feel that even though we don't see and we're not having lunch together and we're not having a coffee together, I've got a list of people that I ring just purely out of my own time issue, just to have a chat for my benefit, for their benefit. And you're still doing something good because they talk about the weather and sport rather than COVID. And it's just great to get away from the news and just actually touch base with a personal client or a friend.
Yes, absolutely. And I suppose that it's also possible to think about people who, people with various disabilities who might have lived on their own, who have additional issues to what you've just described there as well, around needing the help of carers or friends or a wider support network, where that became very difficult as well.
Yeah, I guess you can only really scratch the surface with numbers on the telly and what's coming out from the government, but I've had a small insight in Parliament and been privileged to go and campaign with some of the people that are on this call to go into Parliament, and just found that we were so looked after with about 150 guide dogs in Parliament in the Great Hall, and the MPs were quite astonished that they never heard one dog bark all day long. Yeah. And it would have been absolute calamity if pet dogs were allowed to do the same.
Scott, can I just stop you there for a second and welcome Chris Theobald onto the call. Hi, Chris.
Hi, apologies for being late. I had to restart.
Right, Chris, just as quickly, because you joined us a bit late. So we've got Chloe Smith on. We've just been sort of, doing a bit of a round robin. I'm recording this and we're going live onto the Facebook page. So we're an active speaker view, so whoever is speaking at the moment is being straight out onto Facebook. So should you not wish to be so, then you just have to mute yourself, and then you won't be out there. But yes, I'm sure you've got a couple of guys. Chloe, Chris is from Guide Dogs HQ. He's the campaign manager. I think you two have met. I think I was there because Chris, you attend conferences, don't you?
Yes, been to lots of conferences and parliamentary events. I've been with Guide Dogs for 6 years, so
yeah.
Hello. Hi.
Okay. Right. So moving on, Cynthia, would you like to ask a question of Chloe?
Thank you. I'm a guide dog owner, a lovely guide, my second guide dog called Jem, and I live in Hunstanton, and I'm a speaker and a fundraiser and one of the coordinators of the King's Lynn Forum. But I have been inspired by Lana in the past. I know she's a borough councillor, but I'm one level down from that. And I have actually been a town councillor for a year now. I know it's a bit different because we have to meet on Zoom, but my main thing is other people making decisions that they think disabled people ought to do or can't do. Instead of asking us, you know, what's the problem? How can we help? They just make assumptions. So I'm really working hard in our council, and I'm actually getting through, I think, because I've been asked to have it as an agenda item. So I'm quite pleased at that.
You know what? Can I just stop you there? Chloe has been really instrumental, actually, in supporting disabled people in general into elected office, haven't you, Chloe? So that was kind of one of your little pet projects. So yes, so that's it. Yeah, once I got elected as a district councillor, there was a vacancy on Cynthia's town council. So just go for it, and sort of coached her through it. So yeah, this is something that Chloe will definitely relate to, won't you? Chloe still here?
I'm going to mute myself so Chloe can speak.
Thank you. Sorry, Cynthia. Sorry, that was me not unmuting either. I mean, well done, Cynthia. That's fabulous to hear you say that. It really is. That's so heartening. And yes, I mean, Lana's right. One of the things I've contributed to while I've been in Westminster is a fund to help people with disabilities get into elected office. And there's at least two good reasons to do that. I mean, there's lots of good reasons, but I would just pick out two in particular. One is that obviously, I mean, it should be axiomatic that nobody with a disability should be in and of themselves prevented from taking part in things, or prevented from living life to the fullest. So if there are barriers in the way of a person that can be overcome with, you know, in this case, something that is of aid or assistance, and that requires a little bit of taxpayers' money to support for that purpose, that's been part of it, and I'm sure some listeners will be aware of those relevant funds. There's then a technicality that has had to be ironed out in electoral law, actually, about how that's accounted for in the expenses, and that's important. But the other thing that I think is the other reason I would really push this forward is that, as Cynthia says, you need to be able to have people from all walks of life with all those experiences in public service, because otherwise you're not getting the benefit of their wisdom. You know, you're overlooking those experiences, or you're ignorant of those experiences, and that's a daft way, an absolutely daft way of doing politics. So the more in, the merrier, is what I say, and I'm pleased to have been able to help a little bit of that in some of my work, but more pleased to hear people like Cynthia say it themselves.
Oh no, Cynthia's amazing, and I mean, I'll echo that. I just get really fed up when, you know, policies and laws get made on our behalf, and, you know, yes, they'll ask a lobby group of some description what you think, but actually being one of the decision makers, that just is still not there. Still not there. Maybe one day that glass ceiling will break for somebody, but yeah, long way to go yet. So, but no, it's just amazing to, you know, for Cynthia to do this, and she's making such a contribution where she is. So proud of her. So yeah. Anyway, Ed, is there anything you'd like to ask? Edward?
Good afternoon, everybody. It's Edward Bates. Sorry, I was muted. I forgot to unmute myself.
That's all right.
First of all, apologies if you hear any background noise. I'm in the garden. We're having some building work done next door, so if there's a drill that starts. Just a brief introduction, Chloe. I welcome everything that's been said so far. I think that COVID has obviously been a massive leveler in some ways for all of us, but I think it has been said already, but that certain groups of disabled people are maybe feeling a bit isolated. I'm quite lucky. The thing to point out here is I'm not a guide dog user. I don't have one. I'm a long cane user. I think the thing that has made it difficult for someone like me, myself, is obviously everybody has to be careful. But if you go out somewhere, you used to be able to go, you know, be guided by another person. But now, obviously, in the beginning, that was quite restricted. It's only been in recent weeks where it's been deemed low risk for blind and partially sighted people if they need the assistance of a human guide to get that, because it's been deemed low risk. Now I'm quite lucky that I live with two other people who are sighted, so for me lockdown has been okay. But I appreciate that those who live on their own and, you know, who live in rural parts of Norfolk, it's been very difficult to get out and about for them. And I welcome what you've said about making sure that inclusivity does continue. I welcome your support for all of this, and I hope things like the COVID tests do become a lot more accessible. Having to have done two to be a volunteer twice, so I know what they're like, and I wouldn't repeat the process a third time. Hopefully I won't have to. But yeah, I think the important thing, you've said it already, is also, well, another thing to remember is, before I finish, sorry, making sure that things like cafes, for example, making sure that, you know, people work together to make sure that tables and chairs aren't left sticking out. I know that they want the outdoor season to go on for a little bit longer because they've obviously been held back and closed during the lockdown period. Now, that means that in certain pedestrianised streets, tables and chairs have been left way out, apparently, on roads for people to trip over with canes and with guide dogs. So, yeah, I appreciate having you on here. I appreciate having the chance to speak as a person who does work for Vision Norfolk, but is currently on furlough at the moment. So speaking as an individual, I welcome these forums, and it's a very good chance to have the chance to put our points of view forward. And I appreciate you coming along today, Chloe.
It's an absolute pleasure, Edward. It really is, and perhaps that one takes us on to the subject then of the streetscape at the moment. I mean, I thought this myself actually the other week when I was walking through the city centre in Norwich, and I was looking at these you know, the really kind of cumbersome new orange barriers that are around. I say cumbersome, I mean that because you can see that they're the kind that are you know, they're sort of fat and heavy with plastic, and they're sort of weighted down with, you know, sand or water at the bottom. So they're definitely, you know, there and making their presence felt, these barriers. And of course, people, just as you described, Edward, will be experiencing that in a really different way. You know, I mean, you with your cane use may have you know, an experience that might even be a little different to a guide dog user, but which will be very different to that of a sighted person. And it's terribly easy to sit in City Hall and say, yep, right, that's where that's going to go because that makes sense, without actually having had to go around it with an impairment of some kind or a loss of some kind. So, I mean, it seems to me that the thing here is to is in part a sort of good old-fashioned job of some lobbying. So whether you've had any members who've been able to go to city councillors and talk that through, or indeed the council where you live. I mean, obviously I'm using Norwich City as an example, but you know, the point stands for wherever it is that anybody who's listening might live. I mean, I think that's the first thing to do, is to make sure that you get hold of an elected councillor for that place and tell them all about why this really, really matters. Why it is that, I mean, obviously you can say this better than me, but you know, you may feel that it compounds the problem of the pavement A-boards or pavement cafes. You might feel that it verges onto some of the issues about shared street space. I mean, I know that can be a real hot topic of debate that I'm sure you've probably done many times on this forum. But all these issues often come together, and you know, just because there's a pandemic on doesn't mean they should be forgotten.
Can I just come in on that one, Chloe? Because again, this was, you know, out of all of the wonderful bits of legislation that we've had out, and clearly we're supporting businesses because we love business, and you know, business generates, you know, money for the economy, so that Rishi can then, you know, dish it out to people who are in need, like, you know, the NHS and teaching and all the rest of it. But the new pavement parking licensing, and I brought this up last time at the forum, where the rules were changed that pavement licenses could be applied for and had to be determined within 5 working days. You know, usually these consultations take much longer and any issues ironed out, etc., etc. But these were literally either determined by the local authority, city council, or basically approved. I was like, oh goodness. So bearing in mind, and this actually swept aside years of campaigning by guide dogs and all sorts of groups to, you know, reduce street clutter. It was literally do what you want, pretty much. So at Broadland, I managed to get the director of place to agree that I think a press release went out, and actually there's the design and access statement will be given, you know, a lot of consideration when that's submitted with the application, to make sure that it's right. Because, you know, for example, Ed will support this, when you have temporary barriers, when you just have the ribbon that runs across the top.
Oh, that's a nightmare. Sorry, I'm trying to
I know.
that is a nightmare, isn't it? That's
yeah,
awful.
it is a nightmare, whereas a temporary one, which is a panel, is better, because your white cane, your long cane, will hit it sooner than the ribbon. And actually, when it's just a ribbon, a lot of the guide dogs, bless them, they do their best, but sometimes they just don't register height obstacles, especially ones that they fit under. So it's yeah, I know. And then you get
again now.
Yeah, and then you get person tangled up in ribbon, and everybody's embarrassed, and nobody's happy, and all the rest of it. So so there are ways around it, but again, it's kind of been pushed on to the local authorities to deal with it, rather than somebody thinking it through at Westminster saying that might be a problem, because it is. So that's that's just been one of those pieces of legislation, and I'm sure there's more to come. It would just be handy if there was somebody mopping up the mess afterwards, if that makes sense.
I'll just pop back 1 second on one thing as well, Lana, on what I said about restaurants. Very quickly, Chloe, I want to be clear here, but I do know people who've asked restaurant owners across Norfolk and across the country to move their furniture, or to be more considerate of where it's placed. Now, in the main, people comply very readily and very happily, because, like Lana said a minute ago, we like business, we want to be able to contribute, and therefore the business owners should want disabled people to be able to contribute. So in the main, there's been a lot of complying, if you like, by the owners, but it's just a rare few that cause these problems. And I think having something in place so that if anybody does experience a problem with an owner of an eatery or something like that, where they can go to somewhere where there isn't a lot of bureaucracy to go through, it isn't just going to go, okay, well, whatever, we'll sort this out another time, where people can actually report an issue of accessibility without there having to be an awful lot of fuss and condemnation to make sure that it's sorted. A problem can be sorted really easily and efficiently.
That's a very good point, and of course it touches on some of the sort of cultural points, I suppose, that we've all been through in the last few months of new things now, where we all need to act together and actually kind of be kind to each other, and just use some common sense in the community, because things are happening that need that kind of response. I wonder if I might just ask a question, just for my own understanding. So on the idea of the pavement barriers, or more specifically, I suppose what they are is barriers around a larger pavement space between pedestrians and the road. So to be clear, that's the thing I think we're talking about. I mean, I suppose it would be generally a welcome thing to the forum and the community that there would be more space to walk in, and some safety away from vehicles, right? So the idea of a barrier between pedestrians and the vehicles, is that a good thing in itself, if other issues could be ironed out?
Let's see that it I think it's because obviously we have to encounter temporary barriers whenever there's roadworks anyway. It's just where your usual exit or crossing point across the road might not exist anymore, or might be being moved, etc. So these things kind of in the nicest possible way do fall into what we kind of reasonably have learned to expect of just living in the city. It's just what happens. I think the bigger issue is with the more temporary bits and pieces that have been put out, or that were put out outside of shops and malls, and entrance into shops, and various stickers on the ground for walk this way. Really, it's just signage. Signage has sprouted up everywhere, Chloe, and well, it hasn't for me, because I can't see any of it. And I know that certain shops, I won't name them because others are available, had introduced, while there was still a limit on the number of people in the shops, they introduced traffic lights outside. Again, if you put one outside my shop, I wouldn't No, nor would I know if it was going red, green, or amber, or any other colour. It would just, they don't exist. These things just appear, and you're sort of expected to comply. And I know it sounds dreadful, but you have to have a mishap, once, maybe twice, and it really, really, really puts you off going out again. It really does. I mean, I had an altercation in my local supermarket. I didn't go for weeks. I actually did, and you know me, I'm not sort of like shrinking violet by any stretch of the imagination, but it really put me off. It was like, God, am I going to meet that person again? What's going to happen? Have they actually spoken to them? Is there going to be somebody else on the door who's going to be equally as awful? These things really put you off, and there's only so many knocks that you can have before you actually just go, I'll just stay at home. I'll just stay at home, because it's easier, because there's only so much conflict and stress that you want in your life. Because just trust me on this, going outside, blindfold yourself every single time and maneuver around, and trust me, you'll find ways of staying at home rather than going out as well. It's just the way it is. And most of us try and make the most of life, because it's our life and it's how we have to live it. But there's ways of making it less difficult. Yes. So, and it would just be nice if it was made less difficult, because at the moment it is becoming increasingly difficult. And I think, Chris, you get a national picture, don't you, on what guide dog owners and visually impaired people are facing across the country, haven't you? So you'll have a better oversight of what's going on. Would you agree?
Absolutely. From what we hear, people self-excluding themselves from different circumstances. So there was a shared space up in, I think, in Cheshire, and we asked the local guide dog group, what do they think of it? And they said, we used to meet in the coffee shop there every month, but we just don't go there anymore because it's not safe or comfortable. So the perception of risk and danger can be very limited in itself, even if there hadn't been collisions there. And then when the local authority is checking, how did you find it? They're not speaking to people because they're not there. People sit forward saying, how did you find it? So that kind of, it feels like the burden is the wrong way around. Something bad has to happen, as it says. Whereas actually, make a change, a significant change, it should be a demonstration of how you're going to include people from the outset, like Cynthia's been saying as well, consulting from the beginning.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to take some real lessons on that from this meeting. Well, I mean, I suppose the pledge that I would want to make for public service is that actually it's got to work on two levels, hasn't it? You've got to be able to have the assurance that when you raise a problem, it would get sorted out, but also actually that people are thinking this stuff through ahead and have enough understanding, sufficient sympathy and care to make sure that this is avoided before it becomes a problem.
Chloe, have you seen Cynthia's contribution in the chat box?
Shall I read it out for the benefit of anybody listening? It says, I think this is about pavement furniture for coronavirus. She says, might be hard in our towns and cities where the pavements are narrow. And I guess that was sort of partly my query just then about, when there is limited space, and of course there is also a danger on the other side, namely cars and traffic and bikes and so on. Yes, how do you make the best of a narrow space and including your needs and others as well? On bike lanes, I know bikes, we were going to go on to e-scooters, or you are with your next speaker as well. Bikes and bike lanes are presumably a whole new field of anxiety.
Well, we've had, Edward and I first met in the when the Tombland proposal was put forward. So, trying to negotiate the cycle pass, etc. there, but
don't remind me about it. It was very stressful.
It was incredibly stressful. It was trying to negotiate a better scheme that wouldn't end up, with Tombland ending up and no-go zone for visually impaired people. It was literally, the first proposal was that bad. It was dreadful. Trying to negotiate that was quite hard. And thankfully, in some ways, the cycling isn't all that popular in Norwich. So even the cycle lanes as they aren't used as heavily as they could be necessarily. Can I just ask you, Chloe, I mean, e-scooters, yes, this is, because you're a member of parliament, this is, obviously Jeremy's going to talk about the Transforming Cities and the trial that they've got with Beryl and hopefully answer some questions. But ultimately, this is a trial that the DFT are heavily supporting. And I actually I had a bit of an exchange with one of Grant's spads, and I sort of explained our issues, with the fact that they are quite quick and there isn't any collision testing, etc. And bless him, he did actually do a file search for, policies for disabled people, and he came up with the extension of the Blue Badge scheme and said, we haven't had anything specific, but we have extended the Blue Badge scheme. And I said, well, on behalf of all disabled people, even those with hidden disabilities, I am terribly grateful, but can we please look at curbing the speed of these scooters before somebody gets hurt? And he hasn't got back to me, funnily enough. So, so there is kind of some high level influencing to be done because it just seems to, and it's almost like, we really have to support, greener forms of transport. But, when you ask, well, what's the difference between a rented scooter and the private scooters that still remain banned? And there's no sensible answer, really. So, because there isn't.
Another thing I've noticed is everybody thinks if somebody who's disabled says one thing, they just put it all together. Like, everybody's affected by disability differently. So all of us here have got sight loss. That's the main reason we're all here, but we're all affected by different things. So what might help one individual in the group may not help the rest of us, We all need different things. And that's just unfortunately the situation. That's a very difficult thing that happens in every kind of part of life. I think you'd agree with me on that, wouldn't you all?
Yes. So Lana, I've got to go in a couple of minutes for
I'm just welcoming Jeremy into the room, actually.
Well, while you do that, why don't I say a thing about the pilots, which the e-scooter pilots, which is just this, that here's a really good example actually of something that ought to be done by a pilot first. It's a really important way of doing things to be able to check for these issues. Now, I mean, I sincerely hope that actually the problem you're describing isn't so grave that somebody might have got seriously hurt during any one of the pilots, because that would of course, pretty much destroy that argument as well. But in all seriousness, what you do need to be able to do with something like this, and I'm sure Jeremy would agree from his oversight of the local scheme, is you need to be able to gather up all that kind of evidence about really what's working, what's not working, including the intangibles like self-exclusion, to use the phrase that you've just used here in this conversation. If somebody then, or a group of people, a sizable group of people, are saying, well, actually we're really anxious about this, and therefore we're not walking up Toonland or any other street nearby, that's important and needs to be registered. So I would really make a plea to people in local and central government about these pilots, that you've got to be looking for all the kinds of evidence, including intangible things or including things that are a little bit harder to express, and look at that properly, really interrogate it now and check whether any of that overcomes the benefits that you had hoped for from the scheme, and include people in that conversation.
Yeah.
So on that, Lana, if it's okay, may I thank everybody very much.
Yes, absolutely. So no, thank you so much.
Thanks for coming along. Appreciate it, Chloe. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I know you couldn't come in July, but no, thank you so much for coming along. It's been really brilliant. So I'm hoping Clive can join us next time round, which would be really lovely. So yeah, so we can get the two sides of the city brought together. That would be really good. But no, thank you so much, Chloe, for taking the time out and coming to see us, and really grateful. And I guess we'll be in touch. So yeah, thank you so
Certainly,
much.
and thank you for sharing it so energetically. It's fabulous that that you do that lot, and using all of your own vim and vigor to get things done for people is really what I know you're all about. So well done.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
And what I'll do as well, off the back of this, is I'll use some of what you've told me today, and combine it maybe with some other sources of information for constituents, and I'll put up a sort of a blog piece that tries to get these messages going out further and wider. And if there is any particular information you'd like me to include, maybe you could email me, and I'll get that put together.
Okay, yeah, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much, Chloe. Right, okay.
Right.
So all of us, bye. Thanks, Chloe. Right. Oh my goodness, that was really, really, really good. Right, can I welcome to the meeting Jeremy and Paul? Jeremy, this meeting is being recorded, just so you know. You probably had a little pop-up notice. This is just for backup, because I'm hoping to put it, well, I'm hoping it's streaming live. If it is streaming live, then that's great.
It shows
and
it
also
is. Yeah.
It is streaming live. So because we found that we have that query about the passcode, etc., is that actually a lot of visually impaired people find Zoom really difficult, and actually just being able just to watch things on Facebook just makes it that bit easier, because there's nothing to press other than just being on a platform that they're already on. So just to let you know, there's also Paul has joined us. Paul?
Do you mean Patrick?
Patrick
Donnelly? Is Patrick
yeah,
Donnelly?
sorry.
Yeah, so
yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, just for your benefit as well. This is how. So what I've done is we're an active speaker view. So if you don't want to be going out or your visuals be going out, then just mute yourself, and then you won't be visible to anyone. But hopefully we'll have a discussion. I've taken a couple of questions in advance that people have had. So if I kick off with, in fact, I'll tell you what, Ed can talk to you first, because Edward's from the NNAB. Who
we know Ed, if that's
yes.
Ed Bates, yeah.
Yes. So Ed can put a couple of questions to you about or shall we, Ed, what do you reckon? Or do you reckon, or shall we let Jeremy talk about and
I can give an introduction to the scheme, if that would help.
Go on
just
then.
Background,
I think then people can come back.
And then we can do that. Will that work? Okay.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that.
We might have someone in the lobby. I think Alexandra might be trying to join. I'm not sure.
Oh, is she?
Yes, right. I don't think I can access that.
Oh, sorry, I'm just too busy talking.
No worries.
All right. So the people around the room, Jeremy, we have representatives from. Yes, she is. We have representatives from King's Lynn Forum, and there's a few of us here from the Norwich Guide Dog Forum, and we've obviously got Ed from the NNAB, and Chris Theobald is from Guide Dogs HQ campaigns. So he'll be they're kind of looking at all of the e-scooter trials all over the country as well. So he's asked to have an input. And Alexandra, who has just joined us, hello Alexandra, I'll finally let you in, works for him as well. So yes.
That's fine.
Right.
Okay, brilliant. So
take it away, Jeremy.
Brilliant. Okay, well, good afternoon.
Full title,
everyone.
by the way, so people know who you are.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So I'm Jeremy Wiggin, work for Norfolk County Council, and I'm the Transport for Norwich manager, which effectively means I deliver the wide range of transport schemes that we have in Norwich. So that includes walking, cycling, public transport. Basically, if anything moves, I've probably had some involvement in it, I think is probably the easiest way to look at it. So I've come today just to talk about the e-scooter trial that we will be undertaking in Norwich. I think I'll just quickly go into the background of it, but this was sort of very much a central government initiative as part of the green restart of local travel, and to sort of help mitigate the reduced public transport capacity that we've obviously got in this quite difficult time. So it's really very much looking at the trials of using rental e-scooters around the UK in cities across the UK for a 12-month period to fully evaluate what role e-scooters could have in effectively people getting around cities in a more active way, and in a way that's different to relying on single car occupancy. So it's seen as very much a good opportunity to look at clean, inexpensive way of traveling around a city, and we put an application into government along with many cities across the UK, and we've been granted permission to run a trial. So the government's role in this really is to coordinate and support those trials and to monitor and evaluate how the different findings of the trial areas compare. Is what we find in Norwich, is it going to be the same as what's found in Manchester, for example, or up in Newcastle or in London? So the intention is to run the trials for 12 months, and any extension beyond the 12 months would be subject to local or national government agreement. But at the moment, we're very much planning for a 12-month rollout. And the trial does only apply to rental scooters. It doesn't apply to private scooters that people may have bought themselves off the internet or from a shop. Private scooters remain illegal on anything other than private land. So this does only relate to the rental scooters. And we have partnered with Beryl. So Beryl, we appointed to run our bike share scheme in Norwich, which is going really well. We've got a very good relationship with Beryl, and we have electric bikes as well as normal bikes that are available to hire already in Greater Norwich. And what we want to do is simply add e-scooters, so electric scooters, to that, to the availability of mobility that people can use. And it's great in our respect because we'll have one provider who effectively provides all of the micro mobility options in the city, and it gives us a very good platform to actually measure the different types of micro mobility that we've got, whether it's a bike, an electric bike, or an electric scooter, avoiding factors such as competition between different companies, for example. So really, people are making a choice very much based on what is presented to them in terms of an opportunity, rather than a price war or a difference in company approach or branding or anything like that. So it provides the opportunity to look at that in a different way. So that's really the background to where we are. And Lana sent through a number of questions, so I don't know whether you want us to go into those questions now, Lana, or whether Ed had some questions about the concept, or whether anybody has any just general questions about where this has all come from in the first place. So I'm happy to just pause at that point and see if there's any initial questions that come up. Or Patrick, I don't know whether there was anything you just wanted to quickly introduce Beryl. That might be a useful start at this time, Patrick.
Yeah. Can I just, for the benefit of everybody here, I actually sit on the Transforming Cities Steering Committee, so with another hat in a parallel life that I live. So yeah, so just to let everybody know, I've kind of watched this, but I'm just grateful to Jeremy and Patrick for attending today too, because there are specific concerns that come from the point of visual impairment in and around Norwich that I'm hoping that we can sort of wrap our head around today. But yeah, Patrick, if you want to say a bit about the scooters, and then we'll go to the floor, really.
Sure thing. So my name's Patrick.
Yes, welcome.
Hi. Thanks for having me. I'm the head of policy at Beryl, and we have been operating in Norwich since March this year. But we've been working with Norwich for the past, say, 14 to 16 months. So we were successful in winning a tender to provide bike share back in August, and ever since then we've been planning and working with Norwich on how to kind of deploy a safe, controlled, successful micromobility offer in Norwich. And of course, to start with, it was just bikes and e-bikes because there was no There was no kind of fast tracking from the DFT to get e-scooters allowed on the UK's roads. That's obviously all changed. So now we're looking at that as a kind of addition to this vehicular mix in Norwich to try and help people not switch to using private car when we're seeing lots of increased congestion around the UK, and we're seeing this as a kind of levers to help people get around more sustainably around Norwich. And I should add that we have worked with. I think I've just sent an email to Edward, or he was CC'd in the email. We worked with the Norfolk Association for the Blind as part of the mobilisation. So the work that we normally do is around where the specific parking bays are. So I should probably just, if you don't know how the barrel.
Oh, Patrick? Is it just me or is Patrick frozen?
It's just a break in communication, I think. So just see
Barrel scheme works. There's pre-agreed. Is that come back again?
Yeah.
Is that back?
Patrick, you've got a question in the chat box as well, so you might just want to have a quick glance at that. So as you continue.
Question is, what does Beryl stand for?
Yeah, I was expecting that question to come up. That question comes up pretty quickly all the time. We're named after Beryl Burton, the famous UK female cyclist. Because we have first and foremost a cycling company, but it also has the two-pronged kind of meaning. We also have I don't know if you've seen the Beryl bikes, but they have a laser light that comes out of the front that projects the image of a cyclist about 4 to 6 meters in front of the bike. This is this comes on at night, and it's to alert drivers that there is a bike potentially coming up their inside, and it's to reduce the amount of left hooking. So it reduces the blind spot by about 33%. But that colour of the laser is also beryl green. So it's both the laser, which sounds very cool, and Beryl Burton is the reason for Beryl.
Right, I didn't know that. No,
if you see them around at night, you'll notice a little kind of about 4 to 6 meters in front, a green cycle symbol will be projected from the front of the bike, and that is
it's okay. Unlikely. I have zero night vision, but it's fine. I'll take your word for it. Sorry. It was. Oh my God! It was one of those. It's fine. Carry on, Patrick. You're fine.
I can realise that's probably not the.
It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. We're all good. Carry on.
And just a bit of background on the scheme. So in kind of. Unlike other kind of e-scooter and maybe bike share schemes that you might have seen where people can leave them anywhere and just lock them, all of ours are around pre-agreed areas that we've already agreed with Norwich, areas to park bikes. And so these have all been installed aligning with the kind of DFT manual for streets. So all of them leave about minimum 2.1 between the edge of the bay and the curb edge to allow for people to safely pass by, and also which also kind of aligns with social distancing now. And we also shared all the locations of those bays with the Association for the Blind in Norwich and Norfolk prior to launch, to allow them to have comment if there were any issues with any of those locations, because we know that there are certain routes that are prioritised by people with visual impairments. No issues were raised then. We were supposed to have a guided walks on the city centre bays with people with visual impairments, but due to COVID, we had to cancel that because it was scheduled just before launch in March. But that's something that we're completely open to doing. But all of the e-scooters that are introduced will also have to use these bays. And we have just around 96% compliance. So what happens is if somebody doesn't park the scooter or the bike inside of that bay, they're charged an additional £5. We see that as a kind of good way to manage the control of ensuring people park in those parking bays.
Okay. So
can I come in for a second?
Yeah, sure.
Go on then, Ed.
First of all, Patrick, thanks for the email, and Jeremy, good to see you. I had to pop away for a couple of minutes, so I've only just sort of caught up.
Okay.
With regarding what you've been saying, Patrick, yes, indeed, I have seen your email. I'm still technically on furlough. So what I say, I'm here as a general blind person today. Lana invited me a lot, if you understand. So it's a bit of a balancing act for me here at the moment, having to sort of talk work stuff, which I know a fair bit about, but I have to be a bit careful of.
Sure.
What I will say is it's just a general blind person who walks around. I don't have any sight. So for me, the stands have to be parking bays, and the scooters have to be safely parked anywhere, 100%. Because on a long cane, we have discussed this, but I'll say it from the record on the forum. For those who have low vision or limited vision, but is good enough to have some sight, as long as everything is well kind of highlighted and there is good contrast between the stand and the pavement, and it's easy for people to navigate their way around, so they don't have to put themselves in any kind of danger when walking the streets, then people will be okay if they can be found and if they can be spotted with somebody who's got some residual sight. Maybe also a little bit of, I don't know what you can do, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, could you put some like raised paving sort of in around the stand? You may well do, but obviously because I've not really been in the picture for several months, I might be a little bit out of it, so apologies if you have already gone over certain bits already.
Well, we had, through like previous deployments, looked at different ways in which we could assist with people navigating around these bays, and we have looked at tactile paving, but it's not allowed legally to be used for this use. It's only when you come to like a curb edge to alert people that they're coming to, I can't remember the terminology it was now, but like a potential hazard. And this wasn't classed as that, so we're not actually allowed to use tactile on the bays. What I would say is that the bikes themselves are a kind of high contrast kind of green, and the scooters will also feature that as the kind of majority colour on the stem of the colour. So they would be more visible than other bikes, I would hope.
Can I jump in before I'm going to let Jeremy answer the questions that I kind of sent off in advance? It's what is coming up for me is that what is, because privately owned scooters, e-scooters are still banned, rented scooters are out on trial. What's the difference? And B, to Jeremy, and I am firmly wearing my Norwich Guide Dog Forum hat on, is how does this sort of scheme, get past any sort of equalities impact assessment? Because use of these scooters is, we are prevented from using them full stop, and yet because they're used on footpaths and on shared services and places that we use as pedestrians, they cause an extra hazard to us. So there is literally no upside for somebody who's who has reduced mobility, visual impairment. That there is no upside to this scheme. There really isn't. I can't go out and get myself a scooter. I will hurt somebody if I try. And so that's where I'm coming from. It's where's our upside, Jeremy?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a specific question there, isn't there, about what is for those who are blind and visually impaired, and then there's also what is it for the wider society, if you like, in terms of the benefits of introducing a new means of getting around cities in a different way. And I think that we could say the same about the bike share scheme that we've got. This is in terms of the impact that there may be. I think that what's important is that what government, you started off the question, I think, what is the difference between a private and a rental scooter? I think that the reason that government have gone down this route is that they know that there are lots of private scooters already being used out on the network, and they're being used in a some people are using them absolutely in a good way, but others are using them in a antisocial way and actually causing a nuisance, and that situation wasn't going to change unless there is a change of legislation to properly say, well, this type of movement is acceptable, or it's not acceptable, or it's acceptable but on various terms and conditions. So what government is very much trying to do is acknowledging the fact that there are lots of private scooters out there that are from all sorts of different manufacturers to different standards of quality. Some have lights on them, some don't have lights on. A very big difference is to properly evaluate the impact of these, to then make a more informed decision in 12 months time or later as to whether this type of mobility has a place in society or not. So I think that's the background to where we are with why the scooters are coming forward, and why we've got a difference between private scooters and rental scooters. So the rental scooters are part of the trial and the evaluation. There's very much a closed sort of initiative which enables that assessment to be done. If you had just simply relied on trying to assess the impact of private scooters, that would be almost impossible to do because of the different types of people that are using them and the different types of behavior. In terms of ultimately what the plan is that the city centres will become less car dominated, and will become more places where people are able to move around more freely, and in a better environment. Most city centres are so dominated by largely dominated by cars and general traffic, and not parts of Norwich are no exception to that. So I think you asked the question, what is it in it for blind and visually impaired people? I would look at it probably in the wider picture is in fact this could lead to a very significant change in the way that people in general travel around cities and the look and feel of cities, which will then impact on hopefully a better environment for everybody to be walking through, to use the city. And you might say, well, that's that could be some way off, and you would need a monumental change in people's behavior to ultimately get to that point. But I think that is what we're looking at is a stepping stone to changing the way that people as a whole use the transport network. And if people are then not using large polluting vehicles which take up a lot of space and we know cause a lot of injury when they come in conflict with people or other objects, then that must be a positive thing. But that I think, at the moment I'm looking at it as very much in the large wider picture. And I think your question was very focused in terms of what does it mean for me. So that's the best way I can answer that, I think, at the moment. I don't know whether anybody else has got anything they can add to that, or sort of help me out a bit on there.
Well, I think I'm going to slightly push back on that one. Is
yes,
that the cycles are going to be introduced to the roadways mostly-ish, but the e-scooters are specifically going to go on to pavements, aren't they? So I think that's
not specifically. No, the scooters themselves are classified as a motor vehicle for the purposes of what we're doing as part of the trial. So for that purposes, where we have got a location where we allow cycling and walking, but you wouldn't have a general vehicle, a car for example, driving in that area, then scooters also can't use those areas as well. So cycle lanes and bus lanes and on the road itself is absolutely fine, but it's there are restrictions. You certainly can't just go on any pavement and use electric scooters. They are just like cycling. You can't do that on a general pavement. The same applies for electric scooters. So we don't want to be seeing large numbers of people using scooters irresponsibly on pavements, and that is made very clear when people take the decision to hire a scooter out to use in Norwich, as it will be in other cities as well.
Okay. Could I have a quick question? Do they have a motor in them? Because what's the standard about that? I'm thinking if I'm walking down the road, for example, and that's coming towards me, did you say 12 miles an hour? Obviously, will I be able to hear it from a distance? And also before it's too late, and like for those people who may have hearing loss and sight loss, is it going to be loud enough for them to pick up sound?
Patrick, are you able to pick that up as a technical question about the scooters themselves? Yeah.
The audible value will be similar to the e-bike, which is already in Norwich.
So they effectively make a sort of, it's like a humming noise, isn't it? It's not a loud, high-pitched mechanical noise, or it's not as noisy as a car, for example. It's effectively just a fairly low hum. But I think it's important to say that at the moment, I think the specification for electric scooters does not require an audible noise to be emitted. Is that right, Patrick?
Yeah, that's correct.
Chris, did you want to come in?
Okay. Thank you for coming along. And I'm Chris from Guide Dogs, working the campaigns team.
Hi,
along
Chris.
with Alexander. And we understand the need to kind of gather evidence and see how these scooters will work, but we are increasingly concerned with the trials. So they're originally meant to take place in 4 parts of England, and now they've been extended much more widely. And already there's really alarming reports and examples of very poor behaviour. In many places we were told there would be geofencing, so the scooters would be limited where they could be used either in speed or location. That's not being upheld. We're seeing younger children get access to them when they're meant to be restrictions on who can use them. And one area which we felt was very rushed was we were originally told in the Department for Transport consultation they would have a limit of 12.5 miles an hour, there'd be limits on the weight, there'd be limits on the power, and then in each case that was bumped up. And the e-scooter firms can put much more powerful, much heavier, much faster vehicles, which, as the people said, aren't really audible. And also there's not really a step. If you're getting on a bike, you probably have to learn to use that bike. You need to learn how to navigate that, how to control it. Off. Similarly with other vehicles, these scooters, people are just off, loading up and off they go. And some of them, and the potential weight of some of these, the limit, before anyone stepped on board is 55 kilograms. And I think I did look that up, and it's 120 something pounds, which is quite heavy. We're not talking about like a push bike here. So we do have real concerns about how these trials are running at the moment.
Okay, number of questions. Did you want to pick up any of those, Patrick, and I'll add bits in, or?
Yeah, well,
we're limiting the speed for a start, so.
Yeah, I was going to say, the first things first is that we take the decision jointly ourselves, Beryl and Norwich, to limit the speed ourselves, because the DFT didn't mandate that. So we were lobbying for the lower speed limit, but they were likely lobbied harder by other operators to increase the speed limit. But yeah, as I say, we are limiting ours to 12.5 miles per hour. What you've probably seen with other e-scooter launches is that they have been done with operators completely new to the UK. They won their contract 2-3 weeks ago, and they've put e-scooters on the street within that kind of time frame. We won our contract to provide this service, similar service, in Norwich last year in August. We've been using geofencing to manage where the bikes are parked very successfully for the last 6 months. 96% of all of our journeys end in the correct geofenced bays. Any bikes that don't end their journeys in those are picked up by our partner Zedify, who've been based in Norwich for the last 6 years. So we've got we've got a good relationship with the city. We've got a trusted partner that are making sure that the current bikes are in the right places. And we don't see it as, this isn't a new thing to Norwich now. It's not. We're just adding a new vehicle to the existing offer. It's not a new service that's going to come and operate any differently. We don't see any reason as to why users will treat these e-scooters differently to they would treat our bikes and e-bikes. And we've had very little complaints, and we've also had, after 50,000 journeys, we've only had 5 minor incidents which have just involved the users that are riding the bikes themselves. So we've built a system that's based on control and management, and because it's not good for us. We don't want to see people that have any kind of fear and to walk the streets. And that's why we reached out to the Association for the Blind before we even launched, because we're aware of these things, these issues, and we absolutely don't want to exacerbate those. But we do think that e-scooters have a place within the transport mix to reduce things like congestion, air pollution, noise pollution, and make cities more livable. And that's why we're only introducing we're introducing 25 from next week, and we'll be building up very slowly to make sure that it's a managed build up of this service. We're not, you'll have seen the reports of other operators. It's a bit like the dockless bikes when Offo was in Norwich. They were all built around having to put as many of their vehicles on street as quickly as possible, and that was the key to success. Whereas we want to build a well-managed, well-ridden, in terms of both numbers and also safety, system that benefits everyone in Norwich if possible.
We've had a question: do they have a bell, Patrick? And yes, the scooters have a bell. Yeah. I think it's
Okay.
important to mention that, as I say, we're going for a small rollout initially. I think it's important to say that you can only use one of these, you can only hire one of these scooters if you have a provisional or full driving license, and there is a driving license check that is undertaken as part of that. And now, if people choose to hire a bike fraudulently using a license which isn't their own, that in itself is an offence. But we know that early delivery schemes, those checks and balances may not have been carried out as sufficiently as they will be happening here in Norwich. So, you know, we do know who is using the scooters and the bikes, and we're able to then follow up any issues that are reported as not being acceptable. So there are some checks and balances in there. And in terms of training, Chris, you mentioned about training. That's something that we are absolutely committed to delivering for those who feel that you know, they would want training in scooter use. But I think it's also interesting to note that there is no standard training session or program for e-scooters as we currently sit here today. So it's likely that people will be asking for very bespoke training, and we'll be looking to deliver that. Ideally, you would do that face to face, but we know that the current COVID times, it's quite difficult to do face to face. So we'd have to see what can happen. But it might be, you know, we have to put some example videos or some, you know, something that you can download, for example, which either audibly tells you, you know, the key points about how to use the scooters, you know, as well as visually. So I think that there's a number of things that we need to look at there, but training is absolutely part of the offering in Norwich. But because, you know, we need to understand what people's training's needs are, because there isn't a standard training program that we can plug into, but we will get onto that.
I think that's actually a valuable point when you register to, you know, through the app to, you know, hire one of these scooters, you know, perhaps there could be, you know, you have to watch the video before you can go on to the next page and, you know, properly click through the pages to say that you have understood,
yes,
etc., you know, the terms and conditions of using them. And actually, when you said that you either have to have a provisional or full driving license, so do incidents involving e-scooters and the bikes, would they count as points on your driving license or not?
It's a good question. I don't believe that they do, but
should they?
There was a legal case actually a while ago where a young person was using an illegal their own e-scooter, and it was an interesting case because the judge, they were going to get points as soon as they got the license.
Okay,
so
yes, I remember reading about that. Now you mention it.
I'm not sure if that was upheld, but it was
yeah.
And
So,
you know,
so that is the case then, Chris, is it? Because that's
I believe it could be. I think that's something I just need to double check. It was kind of they're exploring into new areas. But thank you for your responses.
we do have a really good relationship.
Yeah, go on. Sorry.
I was going to say we have a really good relationship with the police in Norwich, actually, and you know, we don't want bad users using our system either. So that's absolutely something we would support. Yeah.
Okay. So you've got more questions, Jeremy?
Yeah. I was just saying, just building on the relationship with the police. We know that the police themselves have got concerns about the number of private scooters that have been appearing on the roads in Norwich, and we're going to work with them and our Pushing Ahead team to work very hard on awareness raising about what is acceptable with use of e-scooters and what isn't acceptable. So that's very much a joint working with the police, because they themselves recognise that that this is an issue that is taking up some of their time, and they don't want it to be a dominant factor that takes up their time. So the more we can work together on educational purposes, the better. So that's happening now, and I'd hope that we can you know, get that out out into the wider network in the next week or so.
Okay. Have you got a couple more questions, Jeremy? I'm just trying to think what I sent through
you
to
asked a question about what measures will be introduced to ensure that e-scooters stick to the roads. So I think this was, you know, in response to maybe the potential for them being used on pavements and being left in undesirable areas and stuff. So I think, as we've already said, there is at the moment very good compliance in terms of where people pick up and drop off e-bikes and bikes, and as you said, the scooters will simply be another mode that's added in. So we're expecting and hoping that there will be good compliance with this as well, and that we won't end up with scooters being left just abandoned in the middle of footways or in the middle of areas where they shouldn't be.
Okay.
Just hiya, it's Alexandra Jones here from Guide Dog.
Some equipment in.
Yeah, hi Alexandra.
Hiya, just a quick question about the geofencing.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question about the geofencing. What's the accuracy? Because we've seen with the Coventry trials that the geofencing wasn't accurate enough, and it was actually taking too long to kick in. So people had gone past the spot that was meant to be geofenced off before the geofencing kicked in.
Okay, that's a very technical question. Patrick, do you have anything that you or your colleagues know on that?
Geofencing is managed using GPS, and GPS has a maximum accuracy of 2 meters, 2 to 3 meters. But our scooters and our bikes and our e-bikes, they transmit their location every kind of 2 seconds, which means that they have a really high tracking accuracy. And that's why we're able to enforce the use of the bays that we have in Norwich, because they're kind of live tracking their location, which is probably why the operators that operated in Coventry had issues with geofencing. One, because they hadn't done it in the UK before, and actually it wasn't managed by them. They're not the operator of their geofencing system, whereas we are, and we've done it across Norwich prior. And it's likely if the GPS was or the geofence was kicking in too late, that their vehicles aren't kind of transmitting their location as frequently as ours are. And that's normally due to the ability of the hardware on it to harvest power, basically, how efficient their battery harvesting is. So because we've got extremely good battery harvesting technology, it means that we can spend more power transmitting the location of the e-scooter, whereas other kind of competitors maybe might not. That would be my reason as to why they maybe aren't able to enforce it as accurately.
Thank you, that's really useful, because obviously I was given loads of assurances about geofencing and now I'm starting to panic, so it's good to know that there is a bit of differentiation between the different operators. Thank you.
I think that's important. We have there are different operators out there, and again, that's one of the things that the trial is trying to identify, I think, is, how different are the different types of equipment that you can use, and how well do they each perform? Do they all perform pretty much the same, or are there very big differences which needs to be taken into account? So we're confident that the Norwich technology is as good as anything that we could have got our hands on. So.
Well, and I'd just say, it's been, we've had 50,000 trips, and it's been used very well across Norwich. Every single bay is geofenced. There's nothing more physical than a geofence and a line and the actual visibility of the stands. But we've still had nearly all of the journeys finish in those bays, and that's been through pricing and geofencing.
Cynthia, do you have a question for Patrick or Jeremy while they're still here?
No, thank you. I think they've answered most on the chat call. Thank you.
I know. Very, very good use of chat there, Cynthia.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Lana, you'd asked us a question about the problems with trial areas in Coventry, Birmingham, and other areas where things haven't gone to plan. Would we be prepared to pause the trials if any issues are encountered in Norwich? And I think overall, yes, we would be prepared to pause. That would obviously be a last resort, because we'd hope that we'd planned, for as many eventualities as we could, and that we would want to be able to work with stakeholders and partners and the public and everybody who's associated with it to iron out and resolve any issues before such a drastic decision is taken to halt or stop a scheme. So I think we're going into it with our eyes open. We know that there's going to be lots of things that will happen that we'll then have to look at carefully and work out what the correct response is to that. We need to be careful we don't make knee-jerk reactions to everything that happens, because that might in itself prevent us from working out the solutions to some of these issues. And as I said, really a key part of this trial is to identify how how different groups, how different people use the system, what impacts it has on people. Are they positive or negative? Are there things that happen which we weren't expecting? Are there things that we were expecting but didn't really materialize? There's a very much a big learning curve on that, and I think that was probably the last bit of the conversation maybe we heard with Chloe Smith MP when we logged in. I think maybe that's what she was talking about, the need for there to be good communication and for there to be good dialogue about good and bad things that we may have during the trial.
I think I think what we touched upon briefly is something that's probably quite difficult to measure, which is self-exclusion, which is what a lot of disabled people generally, and visually impaired people, quite a lot, self-exclude from going out using public transport because the built environment has become so difficult with all the temporary measures, with the reduction of capacity on buses, etc., now you're in, with the e-scooters. It's just become, when you have a choice of, shall I go out today, and you just go, oh no, I just won't, because it's too difficult, it's too dangerous. Last time I went out, somebody on an e-scooter whizzed by me and the dog got scared, and it's just the trouble is, Jeremy, you only have one of those incidents happen to you, and
to knock confidence.
It does knock confidence. It really, really, really does. I suppose in a way that it's kind of difficult for a fully able-bodied person to appreciate how tricky that is, and that's why I've, for example, I know this isn't to do with you, but when it comes to access refusals, especially on public transport and in taxis, you think, to a local authority, to the, they just say, oh well, it was just the once, but to us it's just like, no, actually I was left waiting out in the cold and the rain for an hour. I had to have an argument with somebody who didn't have terribly good English, all those sorts of things. And I'm just talking about the reality of it. I'm not discriminating or being horrible about anybody in particular, but all those elements kind of drag together into just, is it worth me
even
making
bothering
this trip or not? Because between going to the supermarket and the one-way system and the markings on the road that you can't see, the face mask that the dog can't hear you speak through, name it. We've got now, rather than 10 good reasons for leaving the house, we've got 10 good reasons for actually just
thinking twice.
Thinking twice, and it's not helpful. So that's why I'm so appreciative of you guys coming on to talk to us today, because it's kind of raising awareness that these issues do exist.
That's
I mean, of the population.
No, that's absolutely fine. And we know that at national level, the government is engaging with different groups. I know they're engaging with the National Guide Dogs for the Blind and other groups at the national level, but we obviously want to make sure that we engage at a local level as well, because what happens nationally, or the feedback nationally, might be very different to what we have locally. Good or bad, we don't know, but we definitely want to make sure that that dialogue is kept open. Obviously, we've got a good relationship with yourself and in regular contact, but we'd encourage anybody, all members of of the Guide Dogs or any other organisation to talk to us and get in contact if there are issues that they simply are really struggling to to get on with. It isn't our intention to put anything out or operate a scheme, and Beryl exactly the same as us, that causes distress or anguish to anyone. That isn't the aim. This is to try and move society forward, not to put barriers in that aren't acceptable. So
okay, well, on that point, I mean, unless anybody's got any pressing questions, I'm just sort of looking around. is there, could I, under the page, under the post, is there a contact email address or number that, I can give out on the page for people to contact if they do experience any issues with this? I mean, if you want to email it to me separately, then
I'll email it to you separately if that's okay. We'll probably give you a number of different, different options depending on what the issue is. Whether it's specifically an operational issue that's is a concern about a scooter that's been left in a wrong area, or whether it's a more strategic issue that would require the county to to respond to, and not necessarily Beryl directly. So yes,
Okay.
I'm more than happy to send that through, but we we will respond to all of those queries, and happy to talk to yourself and colleagues at any time.
Yeah, oh no, that is so useful. So yeah, I'll just go quickly around the room. Is there anybody who wants to ask any more questions? Chris, Alexandra, Cynthia, Ed?
One point.
I'm not taking questions off Facebook because
the guide dogs, the RNID, the Flockington Trust and Visionary, which represents local blind organisations, put together guidance for local authorities on e-scooters and for operators, a separate document. So between us, we should have circulated it to local authorities and operators. So if you haven't got a copy, we send it to you of the relevant guidance to you. Just if you haven't got it, we can send it through.
Yeah, have you got it, Jeremy, or
can
not?
Can we get your contact details, Chris, to get hold of you, Chris and Alexandra?
Okay.
Yeah, I'll forward Chris's email address to you, Jeremy, if that's okay. Is that all right?
If that's okay with Chris, yeah.
Yeah.
As a local council, I don't think we have the guidance.
Okay, it might be that it's worth circulating to everybody who's on the who's on this call, to be honest.
Yeah, and as I said, we do have an audience on Facebook right now, but I just because there's a 20-second because there's a 20-second lag between what we're doing here and what goes on there, I don't tap into it because I just end up confused. So
okay, if there's any if you come across any issues, Lana, that you think need to be addressed, then please send those over, and we'll respond separately.
I will do. Yeah, and thank you so much, Jeremy, for joining us here today. Honestly, it's just been, I really am grateful, because at quite short notice, and on the eve of the e-scooter trial, you come out to talk to us about this, and it's just really helpful that you and Patrick are here, and you've explained in some detail how it's going to operate, and that we are all sort of on the same sort of page as to keeping it.
And I'm sure I speak on behalf of Patrick. We'd be more than happy to come back to a future meeting if that would make sense, to report how things are going.
Yeah, well, that might make sense, because maybe in a couple of months' time, see how it goes, just to see if there's any issues. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, I was going to say, equally, to hear your feedback on how it's going, and you're talking about those kind of qualitative things that aren't always as measurable. Helping, if there's any assistance that we can do with circulating surveys to people that belong to your organisations, and absolutely we can, and we can try and help to measure that.
Yeah, because, as I said, that would be helpful, because as I was saying, the big problem at the moment is self-exclusion, whereby, and in fact, we had this when I was doing an in conversation with one of the businesses, and he said that people up to the age of 50 are coming out in droves, enjoying the sunshine and being part of, but there's a marked drop-off with people over 50 and their return to any activity. So that's what they're finding in holiday businesses, etc. So there is a degree of self-exclusion that isn't just amongst what's the word, between people with mobility issues or visual impairment or just general disabilities. There's actually a bigger problem in society as it is with self-exclusion for all sorts of reasons, to do with COVID, to do with so we're a long way off getting back to anywhere near normal, really, until we get a vaccine out. So okay.
Well, thank you for having us. Thank you for having us, and hopefully we'll see you again at a future meeting.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming along, and thanks also for doing what you do in work capacity for me as well. I'll be in contact when I get back, but I'm sure one of my colleagues who is in work might well contact. So I'll speak to you when I get back. But I appreciate you coming along and Thanks.
Okay, lovely to hear from you again, Ed.
Yeah, brilliant.
Thanks,
Right.
Jeremy.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you.
Patrick.
Patrick.
Right.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Cheers.
Okay.
Bye.
Right.
Bye.
Well, on that note, everybody, I'm going to say thank you to everybody who's attended today, and I hope everybody found this really useful. We'll see what feedback we get on the page. And is there anything else before I finish the forum for today? From anyone who's still here?
I was just wondering, Lana.
Go on.
I wasn't sure. I didn't want to ask in case there's already one in place. Are they having a kind of regular stakeholder meeting for the e-scooter trials in Norwich?
Oh, I believe that the Transforming Cities meetings are open to the public, but I could ask Amy. You know, that's the one that I
That'd be useful,
on,
yeah.
technically. It's
just having something in the diary. Obviously, it'd be great to get them back on, you know, a future forum meeting. But I know for other areas, we've got fortnightly meetings to discuss, and actually, so much seems to be happening with the trials that we need them on a fortnightly basis.
I will send out an email with Jeremy's contact details, and I'll circulate it to you and Chris, so you know you can all talk to each other. I don't think because Transforming Cities, obviously it works on a number of different projects. You know that. You know, like we were talking about the St Stephen's project very recently, and you know what's in place there. So I think actually a lot of it, you know, Edward feeds into it through the NNAB as to what is or isn't suitable. But because he's on furlough, you know, perhaps it would be great if you were in the mix as well, just because there's.
I would say yes, please. Can I jump in? I say yes, please, because my role.
Got to go. My Tesco man's come. Bye bye.
Okay, bye, Cynthia. Thank you so much for coming. Take care. Bye.
I would say definitely having more contact, because when I go back, my role is changing. So it could mean I do less of this. I mean, I can't go into it all now, but yes, please. We want as much engagement and to work alongside different organisations as well. So yes, please.
Okay, brilliant.
I mean, it would be helpful if, you know, if as the Norwich Guide Dog Forum, we kind of became, I suppose, you know, we encapsulate a certain number of users, you know, we have through lockdown and through, you know, what I've been doing with the forum, you know, doing it virtually. We've been reaching out as far and wide as we possibly can. So, you know, we've grown the audience of the page, you know, from 120 odd over to, you know, 450. So our reach is greater. You know, as much as possible, because you know, because there's so many people who live with, you know, either visual impairment, or there's somebody in the family who's visually impaired, or it becomes a community thing, doesn't it, where, you know, somebody next door lives with visual impairment, and you kind of tap into information for them as well. So I'll get those connections going, and then fingers crossed we can, you know, shape these projects, because there seems to be a real willingness not to do harm with them, you know, from what I hear from Jeremy and Patrick.
Definitely. And I think you've got the benefit of coming after some of the trials that haven't gone so well, so there's already some lessons learned out there, so hopefully you know that can have a positive impact on
I'll circulate that, and then
thank you.
You know, between us we can get it right.
Definitely, if we can keep this up, because if there was ever a consultation which say I couldn't do, I could then pass it on to you and say, look, these are my thoughts, but could you all put your thoughts together as well on this? The more voices we have together speaking as one in all of this, I think the better. Anyway, I've said a lot today, so I might drop off in a minute. I might stop talking.
No worries. No, but you know, thank you so much. Thank you. But you know, people are comparing. I'm sure there's lots of people on Facebook. I'll catch up with those a bit later. But yes, so fingers crossed we're moving in the right direction. So yes, so on that note, I'm going to say, you know, on behalf of the Norwich Guide Dog Forum coordinators, thank you to everybody who attended today, and thank you to everybody who is, you know, who tuned in on Facebook Live and is going to tune in on replay. If you have any questions that we could, you know, either forward to Chloe Smith MP or to Jeremy and Patrick in terms of the pilot scheme of the e-scooters, just put it in the comment section below. I will also, once Jeremy gets back to me, I'll put in the header, you know, ways to contact the County Council or Beryl if there are any issues that you experience. But on that basis, I'm going to close the forum for today, and thank you everybody for tuning in, and I will see you on the forum in October. So thanks very much. Bye to all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.